to ask Councillor John A. McKeever to lead us in prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for all that you do for us and all that you have done. You showed us your love for us by giving the life of your only begotten Son so that we might be saved. For Christ is the world's Redeemer and the lover of the pure. He is the fount of heavenly wisdom and our hope and trust secure. He is the armour of his soldiers and the Lord of earth and sky. He is our health while we are living and our life when we shall die. Friends, put your trust in the Lord with all your hearts and lean not on thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. And Lord, we ask that you direct us today as we meet here remotely to discuss, debate and decide on the various items we have on our agendas. And we ask that decisions that we come to will be to the benefit of all those that we represent, from the bud of Lewis in the north to the southernmost point of Attersea, and all that lies in between. Lord, we thank you for those that have prepared these reports for us so that we can come to decisions on the various items. We also thank you, Lord, for those that have facilitated these meetings. And although they are a means to an end, I'm sure we all agree that we look forward to the day when we can all meet again face to face in the chamber, Lord, and enjoy the fellowship that we enjoyed during these times. And although sometimes we don't agree with each other on the various issues, we ask, Lord, humility and the understanding that there are some things that we just cannot change. Lord, we ask the courage to change the things that we can, and we ask for the wisdom to know the difference. Lord, we thank you for all our staff, all over these islands, who perform their duties to the best of their abilities at all times. We ask you to encourage them and to support them and help them when they have such difficult decisions to make during these difficult times we face. Lord, comfort those in need of comforting as well. For we live through difficult times and we are unable to comfort those that are bereaved the way we used to. But we look forward to the day where we can hold hands again and put an arm round a shoulder that needs comforting. Or look after those in need of treatment for various ailments at this time as well, be it mental or physical. Encourage them and help them to return to good health so they can continue to be the wonderful assets they've been to their families and friends and colleagues and neighbours. Lord, we thank you for our emergency service who have been brilliant in this pandemic, during this pandemic. We thank you for their doctors and nurses as well, Lord. And we especially think of the carers who are working diligently to ensure that people get treatment in their homes and in the homes as well, Lord. We ask you to be with us at all times. And we ask that we look to you, Lord, for you are a great God. You are a loving God and a caring God. You will protect us and guide us and keep us. The Lord shall keep thy soul, he shall preserve thee from all ill. Henceforth thy going out and in, God keep forever will. Dag alle machts da jachgestjach, kwad I tjegna, og namaster sjonische haun, så skjenne mach gebrach. Magen je peken und kleages tjensjen, skach jest, amen.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. In regard to the conduct of the meeting, a reminder of the usual housekeeping rules. Please ensure your camera and microphone are off. This assists with broadband connectivity and also prevents background noise. I will call on the relevant officer to present a report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak at that point, please switch your mic and camera on. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your mic and camera off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of the recommendations at each item, a no show of raised hands will be taken as indication of the committee's approval. In regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the following protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair, and following consideration of that item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. Now, before we move on to the formal business, I'd just like to give you an update. The Vice Chairman and I, along with Mr. Joe McPhee and the Museums and Archive Officers of the Comhairle, met with Museums in Galway, Scotland on Friday last, or the 19th of March. The purpose of the meeting was to have a discussion between MGS and the Comhairle about the challenges facing the sector and how we can work together to support civic museums. MGS are the national development body for the Scottish museum sector. MGS supports museums through the strategic investment, best practice advice, advocacy, skills development, and general support to the Comhairle's heritage service and community heritage sector. MGS have awarded us over 90,000 over the last 2 years for projects such as Sandwich Archaeology Collections Project, which has been invaluable to the heritage service to survive, especially at a time of staffing and budget cuts. MGS highlighted the value of the museum's activities to the local economy, history and culture being the second biggest driver of tourism in Scotland, and the positive impact of museums on other statutory services. We discussed the challenges facing us as a public sector funding and agreed to consider a funding project to review commercialisation, income generation opportunities. We also sought MGS to help lobby Scottish Government for museums not to pay rates. Museum entry is free in Scotland on the back of the 2 lost visitor seasons. This would go some way to support the economic recovery. I've invited MGS to come to a future meeting in the Comhairle to make a presentation to members, and we have an item later on heritage on the agenda. So that's just to update you on that meeting. Now we're going now to item 1 is the minute of the meeting of the 27th of January 2021, and that's for your approval. Thank you. And the minute of the meeting of the 23rd of February. This was a minute for the budget setting process, and that's for your approval also. The minute of the Crofting Joint Consultative Committee on the 19th of February is for noting. The item on farm animal welfare is also on this agenda for homologation of the Comhairle consultation response. Councillor MacLeod.
Thanks, Donald. Just with regards to the meeting of the JCC, the Crofting JCC, minutes are fine. There was, I find something missed out, that when we did ask for the Chief Executive to come for at our next Crofting JCC meeting on the care home fees and croft tenancies. So I just would like to put that in the minutes. That's all. Thank you.
That's fine. That's fine, John. That's noted. We did agree to that. Thank you. Item 4 is a minute of the meeting of the Fisheries Joint Consultative Committee on the 5th of March, and that is for noting. The future fisheries management strategy item is also on today's agenda. So, John Norman, is that a legacy hand you've got up there?
Sorry, yes. Sorry.
Carol McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. It was for item 5, but you've taken a bit longer than usual, so I'll leave my hand up.
I heard your wish.
Get to 5.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we're just going on to that now. Item 5, declarations of interests, members are asked to declare any interests they have in items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members expressed why they are declaring interest in the item concerned. Please do so now using the raised hand function, and please ensure the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a declaration of interest in item 6. My wife works for the Economic Development section or department, so I'll be leaving the meeting for that, and I'd be grateful if I could return for the subsequent items. Thank you.
Very good, Mr. McMillan. Thank you. Anyone else? I'll be declaring interest in item 12 as a member of the Leader Local Action Group, but I will remain in the meeting for consideration of that item. Now we move on to item 6 as a performance management for 2021 of quarter 3. Sorry?
He doesn't really have to leave.
No. The report is for noting and provides an overview of the community's department business plan related performance for economic development and planning in the third quarter. And Mr. McPhee is here to speak to the report and answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The items for this committee begin at 6.2. In terms of the Heritage Service, the service continues to deliver a range of online activities through this kind of lockdown period. That includes both heritage and archives. They continue to develop a range of other projects, including the Great Place project, and have been very successful, as has been referred to, in securing funding for other projects, such as the Sawrickshire project, and for a digital engagement heritage officer project, as well as continuing to engage with the sector across its wider area. In terms of archaeology, a lot of activity going on in terms of archaeology with the UVAP project, and our archaeologist sits on that project steering group supporting the activity, which is led by UHI. In terms of planning services, officers continue to deliver services working from home, significant number of activities and applications across development management, including very large and complex cases. And so staff are very busy with a whole range of applications of different shapes and sizes currently. Similarly, across development planning and across building control, a range of activities to support the work that's going on, including the call for sites for the housing land audit, as referred to here. Continuing work on the indicative regional spatial strategy, and also looking at the implications of the Planning Act and how some of those elements will be rolled out over the next period. The Business Gateway team have been particularly busy over the period. There's a summary there of all the schemes that they've been involved in delivering directly, and again that continues to be a significant activity of the Business Gateway team, and that's in addition to supporting some of the applications for new business startups, for fisheries investment, and other activities such as Digital Boost. There's another item on the agenda, Chair, as you know, in relation to LEADER, but the LEADER LAG continue to support projects and activities, and there's been some update in terms of the extension of the LEADER programme and employment of staff, but as I said, there's another item on the agenda with reference to that. In terms of the wider economic development activity, a lot of activity around the RCGF and trying to close off and secure the necessary arrangements in terms of procurement for the various projects. Officers have been very heavily involved in the Islands deal and the strategic outline cases for the Islands deal, particularly so over quarter 3. Activity continues on the Spaceport 1 project, Castle Grounds, Great Place, as well as a whole range of activities across the tourism sector to support tourism sector and related sectoral activity. The financial performance is at 7.1, and happy to take any questions, Chair. I think just to take questions at this point.
Very good, Mr. McPhee. Thank you very much for that. Any questions from members? Okay, I'm just going to ask Mr. McKeever if you can give us a quick update on the renewables situation and the dialogue with SSE.
In regard to SSE, the key dialogue over the last period has been in regard to the failed Skye Harris distribution link. Our latest update from SSEN is that the replacement cable is at present being manufactured. They will begin to lay that cable around May time, and the programme suggests that the cable will be in place and energised late August, early September. We continue to engage with them on a range of grid issues, particularly around grid resilience. We're talking to them about the potential of ScotWind and the requirement around grid from that project, the Energy Hub project and the requirement of grid in that project. And we engage with Ofgem to try and make a case across all these elements of grid. Happy to take questions on that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I'm having a wee bit of a job getting this to work. Thank you, Mr. McKeever, for your update. You mentioned a number of items that you are discussing with SSEN. One of them you did not mention was the potential for upgrading the interconnector to Skye. I'm hoping that you're still talking with them about that. And related to that, of course, there is at the minute discussions going on with regard to upgrading the line between Skye and Fort Augustus, which, if we were to get a further upgrade to the Skye link, we would need to influence that discussion as well. And also at the back of my mind always is the fact that whilst we are replacing the interconnector, which was damaged in some way, there is another interconnector going to Uist, which is the same sort of age as the one that cracked up recently, and one would want to ensure that it too was going to be replaced at some point in the not too distant future. I just wonder how discussions in relation to that are going, and of course that would also relate to the sort of distribution network on island, the potential for battery storage, which already Lewis Wind Power have acknowledged in their application. Something that we would want to have, I think, on our own plans going forward, so that we wouldn't have to rely on the battery power oil station. Could you maybe update us on how these things are going, please?
I could, Chair, yes. Yeah. When I used the term resilience in my earlier update, these were some of the ideas that we were talking about in regard to resilience. You know, can we put more resilience into the Skye Harris link, and in regard to the US link, what the replacement programme is for that particular cable. So what they're telling us in regard to that because the Skye Harris cable was a failure, they were able to put emergency procurement in place through Ofgem to allow to move to an immediate procurement solution for putting an additional line and an additional 32 kV link into Skye Harris. it will require them to go into the next business planning round, the Rio ED2 round, which begins later next year. So they will begin exploring around these potentials at that time, and the US cable replacement programme will go into the Rio ED2 round as well. So these discussions are ongoing, and we continue to engage with them on all these matters. We continue to make a case and press a case for the optimization of all grid links to the Outer Hebrides. And I think that will be a theme, an ongoing theme over the next months as we engage with both SSEN and Ofgem. Ofgem obviously critical because they agree or not, as the case may be, to any and all of these upgrade solutions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Mr. McCormick.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. McKeever, for that advice. Very much appreciated. Excuse me. I just wondered, Chair, I mean, I was looking for a report on this agenda. I mean, it's a very important and current issue. Is there perhaps an argument for having a standing item on the agenda on interconnector issues going forward?
I think reports will be produced when they're required, but I think under the performance management item we can get updates when and how often we need them. I think that would be the preferred way to go forward. I don't want to be burdening officers with producing report after report when we kind of get an update under the Performance Management Act. Mr. McLean and then Mr. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee, but would you agree with me that one of the most important, and I'm not decrying the importance of the Skye-Harris link at all, but one of the most important links, interconnector links, is for the economic development of the island, is the big interconnector between the mainland and Stornoway. That one, which is being looked at, and how far are we towards the actual, how can I put it, the actual realising of this interconnector?
That is absolutely a priority for us and our policy position, and I'll ask Mr. McHugh if he can update us on that position.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's important to differentiate between the HVDC cable and the Skye-Harris cable. The HVDC cable is a transmission cable that will export both the commercial renewable developers and the community renewable developers who are in the pipeline. The Skye-Harris cable is a distribution cable that serves the domestic consumers of the Outer Hebrides. So there is a difference between them. The Skye-Harris cable isn't really for export of power. The position in regard to HVDC at the moment is that the needs case sits with Ofgem. When the Stornoway wind farm did not achieve its contract for difference last year, Ofgem didn't reject the needs case. They've kept it in abeyance on the table, as it were. Because EDF were reporting quite quickly after that they would be competing in the next CFD round, which we anticipate later this year. So if EDF Stornoway Wind Farm are successful in that contracts for difference round, the needs case becomes re-livened at Ofgem, and hopefully they can come to a reasonably quick decision behind that. So the decision timelines is completion of the CFD auction round. If Stornoway Wind Farm are successful, Ofgem will then, on the back of that, hopefully reasonably quickly come to a decision on the HVDC. Hopefully that is a positive decision, and rollout of that cable will then begin not too distant after that, with a target date of being in place by late 26, early 27.
Thanks, Thanks, Mr. McKeever. That's an excellent answer, and particularly the clarification between importing and exporting. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very grateful. I'm not a member of your committee. I wish to ask Mr. McKeever, it's a side topic question really, relating to the recent potential for offshore wind power off our western seaboard. I'm aware of initial indications that there appears to be no so-called community benefit requirements for these potential projects. Can you confirm this and perhaps elaborate further?
So in the ScotWind leasing round, Crown Estate Scotland have put out 3 blocks west of Hebrides for commercial interest. So that we know that there are a range of developers who are interested in these blocks, and there is engagement with these developers. What Crown Estate Scotland have put into the lease arrangements is a requirement for community benefit statements and supply chain statements to be in whatever bid they submit. So there will be elements of community benefit coming in through these projects. Now that community benefit is obviously going to be different from land side or terrestrial benefits. A land side or a terrestrial wind farm is obviously on somebody's land, be it community or private landowner. That community or private landowner then has the ability to negotiate a lease and benefits out of that. In the marine environment, the leaseholder is the Crown Estate, so they will be negotiating with the Crown Estate. So we've engaged with Crown Estate Scotland to explore how some of these benefits are delivered into the economy of the Outer Hebrides. So there is an ongoing engagement at present around all these matters.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Okay then, so the report is for Loki.
Chair.
Sorry, convener, can you come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate the thanks to the director and Joe in terms of the renewable energy we've just heard about, and I think we should continue to monitor that, as I'm sure the director will, and I think we should be getting regular updates from the director, as was alluded to earlier, that we get regular reports on this. For some people who've been around this particular process for 10, 15 years, it may seem to a lot of people that another 5, 6 years isn't very much. But I do think we need to keep pressing. We need to keep pressing to make sure that all the things fall into place sequentially, but not with huge gaps between them. Otherwise, we will be back to square one again. So I certainly appreciate all the work that's been done, and I know that the director is very well versed in all of the renewable energy issues, and I'm sure he can hold his own in any forum.
Indeed you can, Convener. Thanks very much for your comments there, and we will be updating you at each committee cycle, and can do that under this item, performance management. And as far as this committee's interests are concerned, do members agree to note the report? Thank you. Now moving to item 7, and that's a strategic environmental assessment, the Outer Hebrides Local Transport Strategy from 2020 to 2030. The strategic environmental assessment arising out of the consultation on the Outer Hebrides Local Transport Strategy. The Scottish Government requests that a screening exercise be carried out to determine whether a full strategic environmental assessment was required. This report seeks homologation of the determination that SEA is not required, and also seeks to amend the Corner Scheme of Delegation, which will be for consideration by Audit and Scrutiny Committee. And Tim Langley is available to speak to the report and answer any questions. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. McKeever. Any questions? Do you want to say anything, Mr. McKeever?
No, I don't think there's anything to add beyond your own introduction, Chair.
Okay. Very good, thanks. So thanks for that. So we'll note that report. No, we agree the recommendations at 3.1. Thank you. Item 8 is the Scottish Government Future Fisheries Management Strategy from 2020 to 2030. The report informs members of the publication of the strategy. The report was also presented at the Fisheries JCC on the 5th of March, and industry welcomed the proposals, which hopefully will go a long way towards community engagement and management of our local fisheries. And Pete Middleton is available to answer any questions, should you have any.
Yep, Chair, I'm here. Yep.
Very good, Pete, thanks. Any questions? If not, then members agree to note the report. So, sorry, Councillor McCormick.
Hello, Chair. It takes a little time for these things to work, I'm afraid. I apologise for the delay.
All right, that's all right.
I just wondered, Mr. Middleton, in terms of what we might be able to do in the future in terms of fisheries, at during the last council, I attended a meeting of a fisheries JCC at that time, where there was some discussion about bluefin tuna and the possibilities of our own people fishing for these wonderful fish. I know that there have been some trials in catch and release. I think these are scientific matters, but can you tell us, Mr. Middleton, is it ever likely to be the case, given Brexit and all that sort of thing, that our own local fishermen will be able to fish for bluefin tuna?
I think in the long term, that's a possibility. There's a socioeconomic study at the moment to look into the possibility of not just doing catch and release, but also sport fishing as well. Mm. And I think the longer term might be looking towards a catch system as well, but I think that's very long term. But in the meantime, it'll be catch and release and a sport fishery for the next foreseeable future.
And is it still the case, may I ask please, is it still the case that fishermen from other countries fishing in that area legitimately catching bluefin tuna?
Yes.
And yet this Brexit business doesn't make any difference to that?
I'm not sure. I think things are still working out about how it's going to be taken forward, but certainly catch and release would be the way forward at the moment.
Okay, is that a reasonably a good way to make a living, for example?
I think it is, yes. In the near future, yes, definitely.
Okay, well that's good to hear. Thank you.
You planning to change your career, Slicker? Thank you. The report is there for noting. Thank you. And item 9 is the farm animal welfare consultation. The report seeks to homologate the response to the Scottish Government consultation on the welfare of animals during transportation. The response was considered by the Comhairle JCC on the 19th of February and submitted by the consultation deadline on the 26th of February. And Mobile Guy is available to answer any questions if you have any. Otherwise, the report is there, recommendation of 3.1 there for your approval. Thank you. Now we move on to item 10, local food production and crofting. The report provides an update on the latest engagement with local food production and crofting sector, including the consideration of the future of abattoir services. And Mr. Mackay is available to speak to the report and answer any questions. Any questions? Mr. McCormack.
Thank you very much, Chair. I notice when we receive indications of planning applications that there are a lot of people who are putting up polycrubs. To what extent, Mr. Mackay, do we have sort of coherent knowledge of how many there are of these, and do we know if it is with an intention to be part of, you know, a sort of island-wide food production scheme of some kind?
Yeah, thank you. We don't have a full list. Some of the polycrubs, it depends how close they are to neighbouring properties. They may sort of fall under the radar in terms of planning. So we don't have a full list, but I can say that in our discussions with community groups for the Islands Deal food hubs, local food hubs, that there were plans for polycrubs and for those to be used for supplying local food hubs. So the answer to your question would be yes, but we don't know the exact detail of all of the ones that would be used for that purpose, if that covers you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mackay. I just feel that there is a lot of scope going forward for our own communities to produce our own food.
Yes, I would agree. Hopefully the Islands Deal food hubs would address some of those needs and help facilitate that process.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I bring in now Councillor McMillan and Councillor Murray and the Convener and Councillor McLean in that order? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. I was hoping to submit an amendment to this recommendation at 3.1 for the abattoirs, so that we add something to the recommendation. I've put it through to the Chief Executive and the Chief Clerk, Mr. Mackay, and the purpose for this committee is to approve the recommendation if accepted, and it would then be a matter for Comhairle, because although PNR has the funding for it, I'm not a member of PNR, but I am a member of Comhairle. So it would be then the purpose of this committee to approve, subject to the suspension of standing orders on the matter, the funding to the abattoirs in Euston Barra to have a parity with the Stornoway facility, and the Comhairle on the end of the month would, or the start of next would, I think it's the end of this month, would then approve the funding that is available, but not within the remit of this committee. So are you able to listen to, well, it's subject to the Chief Executive and the Chief Clerk clarifying the wording. It's something along these lines.
Mr. McGowan, I've had cited it, and you're correct. This would require a suspension of standing orders. I think your amendment, given the financial implications, would be more relevant being submitted to Policy and Resources. I'm going to ask Mr. Mackay, Derek Mackay, to come in to clarify.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. The amendment, as submitted by Councillor McMillan, referred to the use of balances. Balances are not within the remit of this committee; it's within Policy and Resources Committee, and the use of balances cannot be agreed without first a report being submitted to Policy and Resources Committee. So it would require a report to Policy and Resources Committee. This committee cannot decide to use balances.
Okay, thanks for that.
For Policy and Resources, the amendment, as has been said, seeks to reinstate funding which the Comhairle agreed to remove in December 2020. So that would require a suspension of standing order to consider that.
Thank you for that clarification. Who was next? Was it Mr. Murray? Gordon Murray.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much. I was hoping to second Councillor McMillan's amendment, but What I wanted to ask on the specifics of the report is it's quite a high level summary. What I believe it was meant to do was to consult with crofters. So what I want to ask Mr. Mackay is, what was the feedback that the crofters were saying in terms of threats and concerns and opportunities? What were the main opportunities they saw in the current situation? Threats, concerns, and the support they maybe wanted to seek from, the Comhairle Scottish Government. Thank you.
Mr. Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we certainly support. We had a consultation exercise as part of the Islands deal with all the community groups that were interested for the food and drink element. And I can certainly report that one of the major concerns was the uncertainty related to Brexit. And in previous discussions with the crofting interests, we have had ongoing discussions about the future support measures that will be in place. I would probably mark that as the highest priority for the crofting interests in terms of their current concerns, because obviously the cap will come to an end, or the current funding will continue to 2024. And as was agreed at the last JCC, the officers will continue to engage with the crofting interests and Scottish Government on the shape and the support amounts that would be available in future schemes. And these sort of discussions are already happening.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. Just one supplementary question request. If it's possible, Mr. Mackay, can you send me the details or the results of your consultations with crofters, just to give me a kind of steer as to what they're actually saying and their concerns? That would be great, since this report was requested. Thank you.
Well, if Mr. Mackay's seen that, can you circulate that to everyone?
Yeah, in terms of, sorry, Chair, in terms of clarification, we didn't carry out a consultation exercise with all crofters. As I mentioned, the consultation exercise that was carried out was in relation to the food and drink elements of the primary industry strand of the Islands deal, and also the other consultations were through the joint consultative committee. So I can certainly relay the feedback from those.
Yeah, don't include names in the titles, whatever you do.
I think the report was actually requesting consultation with the crofters, the actual food producers themselves.
And that's going to be ongoing anyway, Mr. Murray, in terms of the food and drink stand of the Islands deal. There's going to be a continual conversation with the sector on this, and through the JCC, we'll have specific workshops, as we agreed at the last JCC, on various subjects like that.
Chair, I understand that, but it's good to feedback these concerns to the committee.
Indeed. Indeed. Comhairle.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going back to the point that Councillor McCormack raised with regard to the polycrubs. There are a significant number of community groups who have been given access to ground by common grazing, so that they can do some work, and it's even being done adjacent to schools as well, so that young children can start on that. So I think it's a really good initiative for young children in particular to be able to see their own vegetables growing, and hopefully that will get them to get more involved in food and drink. Many of the people who already have polycrubs and have had them for some years are quite literally reaping benefits from the produce that they have for their own consumption, but also for selling on to other people. So I think this is something we're going to see quite a bit more of in the next few years.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Councillor McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Again, I'm not a member of your committee, but I welcome this report actually, and I thank Murdo for the work he's putting in into trying to help the crofting fraternity. We have to be honest. If we're honest, is the crofting is becoming a dying breed. The crofter is becoming a dying breed. There is a few of us still alive, like Mr. Councillor McMillan and a few others. But within the islands, we have to acknowledge that is the case. Is there an analysis model of active crofters in each village? We talk about, the demise of schools and we talked about schools being closed and that, and the age profile in each district is towards the higher scale. But is there an analysis of actual active crofters within each either township or community within the islands? Is there any place we can get a hold of that, or is that done in the council? So,
I would think, Colin, that would be crofting commission. They do this crofting census every year, as you know. But I'll bring Modo in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't have the details that you're looking for, but when I was drafting the background to this report, I did look at the most recent statistics in terms of actual claimants who would be claiming for whichever schemes that were available under, whether it was single fire payment or other annual subsidy payment. So out of the 6,200 crofts in the Outer Hebrides, we're looking at probably between 1,600 and 1,700 claimants. So that gives you a pretty clear indication of who is actively farming in terms of being able to apply for the subsidy payments. You may have quite a number of others who would be below the threshold and not having enough livestock units to claim. So we don't have that detail of that. But that was the sort of publicly available information from the Scribid site on the number of claimants per area.
That's a fair indication, Murdo, of it. I go back to what the chair said. Donald said there is the Crofting Commission have a census every year or every couple of years, but really that is not an accurate account of the active crofters. You can put in any numbers there, but that is a better indication. That's around a third, not even a third, of crofting that is an active crofters, if we can call that active crofters. Thanks for that, Murdo. That's interesting.
Thank you, Councillor Euston Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come back to a point I've raised with the Chief Executive before, and it relates to Lochmaddy Slaughterhouse. And we've had meetings with the owner, and we've had meetings locally since the budget setting about the slaughterhouse. His biggest problem is the additional costs of running the slaughterhouse, Chair, which is, food standards, agency costs, Quality Meat Scotland, water charges, CCTV, vet charges, and so on. And I just wondered if any progress has been made or can be made in relation to the island community impact assessments, because it's fine, these costs on big mainland slaughterhouses, but it does make a difference to small, very important abattoirs in the islands. And I just wondered if there has been any discussion or any progress made about that. Maybe Murdo could answer that.
Good point. Murdo.
Thank you, Chair. I would have to check with colleagues regarding the animal health implications. I know there were discussions 2 or 3 years ago that Councillor Robertson will be aware of in terms of dealing with the waste from the small abattoirs in finding a solution for use in particular. But I'm not aware of any more detailed discussions that have happened with relation to the higher costs, as you mentioned, the veterinary inspections, etc. But I could check and get back to Councillor Robertson on that.
Very good.
Yeah. Yes, it would be useful if it could be chased up. We did have the problem, obviously, with SEPA and the disposal of waste, which, was being decided by somebody doing a desktop exercise in Dingwall. We managed to resolve that to everybody's satisfaction, but I just think it'd be useful if the other additional costs that make this, uneconomic, if something approaching parity could be found.
Yes, we should follow that up, Mr. Robertson. Thank you. Councillor Manford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Again, I commend this excellent piece of work, the report, as others have done also. But I need to ask, what is the relevance, or is there a different standard of relevance for local food production and crofting to Euston Barra, given the dismantling of support by the council to the abattoirs in Euston Barra? And I see from the previous report the request to look at mobile slaughter facilities. I presume that would be at the furthest reaches away from existing slaughterhouses. And in that context, is it really credible that you would get mobile slaughter facilities for anywhere near the cost of supporting the ones that we've just ceased to support?
I think, Mr. Manford, as I mentioned transportation this morning, and you were at the meeting of the JCC yourself, that we want to look at a solution for the sustainability of all abattoir services across the islands, and that's what we are going to seek to do in terms of the islands deal and in the strand of the food and production element of that deal. And
sadly, that should be in the context of maintaining support until you can do something else, not dismantling it.
Well,
how are these animals going to be taken to slaughter facilities?
Mr. Manford, the budget choice from the last budget was in the budget process at the very start, and went through the whole budget process and the budget setting.
Doesn't answer the questions.
Well, it was there, and there was no.
It doesn't answer the question.
There was nothing said about it at the time. Can I now ask John Norman MacLeod to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Modo, for the report. Very good. Yeah. I just want to mention a few things. Polycrops, yes, excellent to see them going up through the islands, and there are, well, as probably you know, they're getting supported with grant aid from the government, Scottish government, and that. And definitely agree with what Douglas was saying there, that you could see producing through the islands with the vegetables, and possibly even what I'd like to see is small markets in possibly each ward with list. And just want to quickly mention that I was going through documentation from the old Lord Barbara's common grazings, and I came across subsidy payments back in 1969, 1970, 1971 for people who had planted potatoes and turnips. They were getting actually subsidised for that, which we don't know. So maybe that's something for the government to think about. Anyway, what I want to mention is communication with the crofters. I think we need to sort of improve it a wee bit better. It's not a negative thing I'm saying here. It'd be good to get out there more and speak to, I've said this before at meetings, our common grazings clerk, who can, and we all know who our common grazings clerks are, at the word round the crofters. With regards to polycrops, again, schools, there used to be a wee scheme on the go. I know it was happening at Siar, and I think up in Skolnish, Lionel School, and there was someone there coming in to show the kids how to plant vegetables in their own polycrop, plant vegetables around the school, and also take them out for visits to crofts. That's something that could help us. I'd like to see it again. And I slightly disagree with Councillor McLean when he said that the crofters are the dying breed. Well, I think I can see a wee bit of light at the end of the tunnel, knowing that there are a few young people starting to move into crofting. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mr. McLeod, thanks very much. Communication is really important and community engagement in terms of making sure crofters have an input into policy, but also in fostering interest among young people and children in crofting as well. That's important. Okay, I want to wrap up this very quickly. The convener wants to back in, and then Mr. McMillan, and then Councillor Alston-McLeod.
Okay, I'll be brief, Chair. I just hope that the light at the end of the tunnel that Councillor McLeod is looking at is not a big tractor with many lights heading towards him. In terms of the number of crofters, and we spoke about that earlier, in terms of there being a third compared with previous years, there's a different kind of crofting now. What we're seeing, certainly in our community, is many more young people are working on cattle rather than sheep, and the number of sheep are dwindling significantly. But there is also a significant transfer or subletting of crofts to the people who are producing really good quality meat in the area, and post slaughter that meat comes back into the community, and people buy shares of the meat as it materializes. So I think there is a good story there in terms of albeit a smaller number of crofters, but they are doing much more intensive work than possibly had been done previously, and a lot of that's to do with the management of the cattle. So I think we should be supporting that as much as possible, equally with the polycrubs associated with them.
Yes, indeed, and something we can look at with future JCCs, on specific areas like that. Councillor McMillan, then Councillor Alston-McLeod, and lastly will be Councillor Nicholson, and we'll wrap up this time.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned during your talk there that we had agreed as a council to discontinue funding to the abattoirs in Euston Barra in December. Now, that came as news to me, so I went and checked, and I think it must have been September that you were referring to, and the recommendation was to continue the lease at Garmore and Lochmarrie abattoirs for a 22-week period for 2021 on such terms and conditions as the Chief Executive, in consultation with the Director of Communities, shall determine. So the funding is there until the budget setting of this year.
I'll ask, thanks for bringing that to my attention, Mr. McGovern. I'll ask Mr. Joe McPhee to come in, who's available.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The decision on the budget choices was made in December 2020 in relation to the 21-22 budgets. So the decision was taken to remove that option in terms of £10,000 that was in the budget to support that activity. So that was the decision of the council at that time.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Alston-McLeod, please. Okay, you're not there, Mr. McLeod. Councillor Charlie Nicholson.
Sorry, I'm here. Okay, double. Can I just pick up briefly on what Colin McLean raised? A very interesting question about active crofters. Well, I mean, the Crofters Commission, as you said yourself, have all the information, but looking around our crofting landscape, and I'm not saying this is typical, there's a lot of token crofters, if I call them that. And recently I had a good look around our own area. 8 new croft houses were built with grants, and out of the 8, there's only 1 active crofter. The problem is that we hear of young people getting involved, but very few young people. And I think the big challenge, big issue is, if crofting is to survive, it needs a lot more than tokenism. I mean, there are very positive initiatives with polycrubs and such like, but there's an awful lot of young people in this area in particular who have absolutely no interest in crofting. It's like, the old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So it's a debate that has to be continued. We have to engage with young people to try and get them actively involved, not just in tokenism, but actually to be part and parcel of the fabric of the crofting community. And it's a debate, and I think we should engage with fully in the months to come.
Yeah, indeed, and one of the criteria of the crofting housing grants is for recipients to produce business plans on how they will develop the croft land. So, that has to be, that has to go forward as well. Charlie Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome this report like other members and thank Murdo very much for it. This is an exciting report, members, before us. It's an important report, and the point I want to come to, Chair, is I feel, and I'm not a member of your committee, but I feel it would be very good if sustainable communities would back the idea in regards to Macmillan and safeguarding the abattoirs within News and Barra. We might have made that decision as such, but we should relook at it in regards to the report that's before us here and safeguarding and taking things forward as such.
Stop you there, Mr. Nicholson, please.
Yes,
can I stop you there, please?
Excuse me, Chair, can I finish my discussion? Is it possible to finish my discussion? This is unfair. Okay, I'll stop. Thank you, Chair.
I'm addressing a point. It's a point of order in terms that we've already ruled in terms of Mr. Macmillan's amendment, and that is not relevant for this committee in terms of the financial implications. So that's why I intervened there. So you can continue if you want your contribution. No? Okay. Carl McLean.
Chair, excuse me. Sorry, thanks, Chair, for letting me in. Councillor MacLeod summed up very succinctly what I was trying to get at. And I know, although Trenorma thinks that I'm saying that the dying breed in a defeatist sense, I'm not saying that in a defeatist sense. We are far, far fewer than we were in my father's day. And I'm one of these old, well, I'm going to say octogenarians, but old people who are now, we're coming to the end of my crofting career, if that's what I would like to call it. But we need to, he is absolutely right, into a debate of active crofting is an absolute necessity. And in some areas, Sean, it might be the case. My area, not so much the case. And in areas that I go to in Uig, in the convener's place, I actually use crofts in Uig. If there is one crofter in a whole village, they're fortunate in Uig. We need to try to stimulate the interest, and you've alluded to that yourself, Chair, that we need to stimulate the interest so that, in fact, we promote crofting and we get younger people interested in it. And that's why I look at this report, and thanks, Murdo, for it, for what he said. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor McLean. Okay, the recommendations are a 3.1 for...
Excuse me, Chairman. In terms of this recommendation, notwithstanding the finance being part of PNR, are you ruling the proposed amendment not competent?
I'm ruling not competent in terms of this committee's financial budget. And I'll ask you, Mr. Mackay's already clarified to you the position of the committee, and we've already ruled on that. So the recommendations are a 3.1 for your approval. And just to add, for Policy and Resources Committee, should you wish to pursue it there. Item 11, the Scottish Local Authorities Economic Development Performance Indicators Framework for 2019-20. The report is for noting and provides an annual update following the publication of Scottish Local Authorities Economic Development Performance Indicators. The Council's return for 1920 identifies several areas of good performance against the national average. And Don MacDonald is here to speak to the report and answer any questions. Any questions? Owen, do you want to add anything?
Nothing really to add, Chair. It's an annual return. I've highlighted 6 of the indicators that are worthy of note at 2.3. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. No, if there are no questions, reports there for members to note. Thank you. Item 12, as previously indicated, I declare interest in this item as a member of the LAG and that I will remain in the meeting. The reports on the Outer Hebrides Leader 2014-20 programme and update on potential future programmes. As you will be aware, the Scottish Government extended Leader to December 2021 to allow existing projects to fully draw down their grant and will continue to support the administration of the programme until 31st of March 2022. We welcome the letter from Fergus Ewing in regard to future successor to the programme post 2021. I am sure the Comhairle will give its full support to the LAG in the development of the future CLLD programme to enable the good work to continue, which has supported the successful delivery of many community and small business projects across the islands. And Kathleen Morrison is here to speak to the report or ask any questions should you have any. No, that's fine. I just want to put on record my own thanks for all the hard work that the LAG team are doing in terms of supporting applicants through this very uncertain process. So the recommendations there at 3.1 for your agreement. Item 13, the Outer Hebrides Visitor Management Plan. The report seeks approval to engage with sectoral and regulatory interests to develop a 5-year Outer Hebrides Visitor Management Plan. Whilst we recognise the value of tourism to the economy, there are challenges due to seasonal demand on services and resources, and in particular visitor provision and infrastructure. This report seeks to develop solutions by working with several corner services in partnership with the local community and organisations. So McPhee is here to speak to the report or answer any questions. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Councillor Fortin.
Thank you, Chair. Really welcome this report going forward. Obviously, so we saw the issues which occurred last year, 2020, with the huge influx of campers and campers on the island. I'm just a question: what is the kind of time frame for delivering this document, and if the time frame is lengthy, is there going to be any guidance issued prior to the 2021 tourist season? I'm sure we'll expecting to see visitors quite soon on the island, so it would be good to see some guidance associated with this planned document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fortin. Sarah?
Thanks, Chair. Delivery at the moment is going to focus on the 2021 season, so we're looking at really the quick fix opportunities to address some of the things we know were most pressing last year, so opening toilet provision, addressing waste management around both camper van waste and litter and recycling. Those are the things we've kind of focused on in our initial discussions. We've been working with the group who are looking at a visitor management plan specific to the Harris area, and we're also working with Visit Scotland. Our hope is that as the year moves on and perhaps into the autumn, we will start to look at producing a final longer term plan. And we've just had an announcement this week from Visit Scotland that they are releasing an opportunity for funding to develop such plans, and that certain areas, including our own, are in a kind of priority group for applications to that. So it looks actually as if we might be able to potentially secure some funding towards developing that plan more fully, which would be very welcome. And as I say, that's just new in the last couple of days, so we've not really looked into it in more detail. But the priority is very much on addressing the things that we know to happen for season 21 practicals.
Thank you, Sarah. Vice Chairman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I ask Sarah, going forward, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've noticed a lot of applications, and maybe this will address the previous comments about Crofty, from people who are wanting to turn part of their crofts, part of their adjoining fields, etc., into hookup areas and caravan sites going forward. Do we have a list of them? Are we continuing to update the list from the planning applications that we've processed and approved of caravan sites and hookup sites up and down the islands? Because I'm sure in the last 4 years, I've probably seen in the region of 20 to 30 of them. So, you know, outside of the caravan sites we all know about, we've approved very many applications for small areas of crofts, etc., to be turned into caravan sites, hookup sites, etc. So do we have an updated list of where we are exactly with what we've got and the provision for it going forward for the summer season?
We do have a fairly good idea of what provision is out there, because thankfully by the very nature of the businesses, they have to advertise. So a lot of them are linked in through the Outer Hebrides Tourism Destination Management Body. Others advertise directly, but most of them do have a profile if they have gone on to, you know, develop the kind of small scale hookups or provision that we've talked about. But one of the things we want this visitor management plan to look at is trying to gain a really comprehensive picture of what's out there, and what there's a huge variance, I think, between the facilities at different sites. So what may be just somebody who's cleared the bottom of a croft may be advertised as a parking area for motorhomes, and at the other end we may have full provision for waste and electrical hookups at some of the bigger sites. So that is something we'll be looking at as part of the plan, but we do have a fairly clear idea, and I can certainly share that with members if that would be useful.
Thanks for that, Sarah.
So, Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, I'm not a member of your committee, but can I draw your attention, Sarah, to 5.4 in your where you mention key problems that you have come across particularly last year. There was a fair bit of media coverage, and every village you went into, of the disposal of chemicals, toilet chemicals from portable homes and such like. Are we in a better place this year coming up towards what would more than likely be as busy, if not busier, season this year for camper vans and such like? Are we in a better position that we can mitigate what had happened last year? In other words, the disposal of chemical toilets, disposal of toilet facilities, etc. That seemed to be a big problem in all our communities.
Sarah?
Yes, I think we are in a slightly better position. We have been able to invest in a couple of facilities in addition to those that were already in position before last year. We have run into an issue which is nationwide around regulations, regulatory legislation, as I understand it, that's in place, governed by SEPA, which is then influencing Scottish Water's ability to empty and dispose of waste which goes into septic tanks. Obviously, a lot of rural locations for chemical waste disposal for motorhomes have to be, by nature of these communities, in rural locations and rely on tanks. I better stop there because I'm sure my colleagues in environmental health and planning will have a clearer, much clearer explanation than I can give of it. But I know that, as I say, it is something that's being experienced nationally. It's something that's being discussed at quite high levels, and it is something that we have within the visitor management group wondered if there is perhaps representation the Comhairle can make on behalf of our communities in terms of how we work around this, because I think it's fair to say it is it's certainly at the moment constraining development of new waste disposal sites in more rural parts of the country.
Thanks. Well, that's encouraging to see that we have no repetition of, or we will, I'm sure, have in some cases, but a repetition of what was happening last year was horrendous, actually.
Yeah. Councillor Roger Mackay used.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Following on from Callum's comments there, it was a particular problem that people were emptying their waste in various passing places, such like last summer. Now, with the increase in camper vans that we're already starting to see, Is there any way that we could possibly make sure that people would have to have a booking at a specific campsite before they were allowed to come to the islands, to stop people from having the opportunity even to dump their waste in places where the public could fall victim to it?
Siar, do you want to come back on that?
I think at this stage, all we can say is that is something we will look at as part of the different options the management group will look at in the longer term. I think initial research suggests it would be very, very difficult to impose a permit system in the islands, given the nature of our geography and the various different ports of entry. But we certainly at this stage aren't ruling anything out, and that will be something that we'll look at as part of the wider group's work.
Okay, thank you. John Norman, Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, well, Roddy Mackay used actually talked about what I was going to mention, but yes, I would sort of agree with some sort of policy when it comes to camper vans. I know, I think I mentioned this before, they did it in Tiree, maybe worth looking at Tiree, where they just took let onto their islands where there was room for camper vans in actual proper camping facilities. Now I've had in my ward, there is a campsite, and the owners of the campsite have said that they have seen the campsite and there's 2 or 3 spaces, yet they've seen the wild camping, wild parking sort of thing, which isn't very fair on them because they do have to pay fees like everyone else and the upkeep of the campsite. So to me, it would be better, well, let's help them out. And if there is an overspill, by all means, I'm not going to stop anyone coming to the island, but just to police it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mackay. In terms of that would be the difficulty in trying to police that, but try to develop a wider strategy to try and deter that kind of behaviour is perhaps something that we can raise with Transport Scotland via our Transportation and Infrastructure Chairman, Mr. Rooster. So it's something we can flag up. Councillor MacLeod, Alistair.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the report. I think, as 1 or 2 other members said, I think we'll probably see a flood of visitors this year, and particularly camper vans in this kind of semi-lockdown we had last summer. The place was almost overrun with camper vans. Now, a lot of these camper van drivers or the owners are very sensible and sensitive, but there's a rogue element and they just don't care. And we saw horrendous scenarios in various parts of the island. There was a suggestion made, I think, last year. Trying to police them when they come here is very, very difficult. But in terms of the size of some of these camper vans, they cross the Minch relatively cheaply. And there was a suggestion that maybe an additional levy should be placed on them. With Mr. Robertson's clout with Calmac, that this could be collected by Calmac and redirected towards a fund or a fund to improve camper van facilities on the islands. I know it's a difficult thing to try and bring into operation, but I feel that the other side is that there are huge camper vans sometimes, and they take up enormous spaces on the ferries, and sometimes it deters others from coming across, and even people who want to get the other way. They can't get on the ferry, so maybe it's worth throwing this in the mix. Is there a way that an additional levy could be applied to these camper vans so they pay extra, and that is used as a fund to improve the facilities, tourism facilities on the island? Just a suggestion.
I'm not. Thanks, Mr. Duncan. I'm not sure in terms of that. I think the long-term aspiration should be to try and get facilities in place whereby no user has any excuse for abusing our environment. There was a national tourism fund that we have been successful in the 1 or 2 rounds of it. I'm not sure if it's still in existence. Sarah, can you perhaps update us on that National Tourism Fund?
Yes, I think the fund you refer to is the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. We were successful in round one and are still in the process of finishing up some of the projects approved under that. They were largely parking improvements and increasing the number of chemical waste disposal points, some of which have, as I said, proceeded. Others have been caught up in the legislation loophole around wastewater. So those projects will make a difference and hopefully will already be there to ease congestion at some of our key sites come this summer, especially regarding larger vehicles, as Mr. Councillor MacLeod there mentioned. I think we weren't successful in our following applications, but we've had some good feedback from Visit Scotland on what we can do to improve future applications, and it's very heartening to see that our area is one of just a few local authority and national park areas that have been prioritised for this planning fund, which was announced this week, which is also part of RTIF. So it looks certainly as if they're favourable to us developing the next stage of what we do. It doesn't capital money, but that'll be the next step.
Yeah, so that's a funding stream we can pursue in terms of addressing this issue. Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be a double edge to this, really. If staycation is what we're trying to encourage, and maybe more people coming in, there's certainly the number of camper-ons that were coming into the area has been increasing significantly. That in itself causes us difficulties as islanders getting on and off the island as well, of course, and we're aware of the huge transport challenge here. But providing chemical waste disposal points is certainly one answer. However, many of these campermans do not go to recognised campsites, and in fact, it's the very wild nature of being able to go to Comhairle and camp there that appeals to them. So it's difficult then. We come across the problem of maintaining these things. While they're on a campsite, at least the campsite owner can do the maintenance. But when we attempt to put them at ports of entry in various locations, then the ongoing responsibility and maintenance becomes an issue. And I think that providing the infrastructure itself is one challenge, and then providing the ongoing supervision and maintenance of it is another. I'm also aware that SEPA have been less than helpful in their approach to establishing more disposal points. So I would hope that some pressure would be brought to bear there, that there would be encouraged to see that as the better option, rather than have waste discharged loosely on the environment throughout the island. So I would hope that sort of better option would be put to them, and that they would be encouraged to be more helpful in the setting up of more disposal points. And I think they need to be out with recognised campsites as well, because many of these camper vans do not go near these campsites. So just to these points I want to make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. MacLeod. Councillor Roustan.
Just to say, Chair, that there should be a note coming round of a meeting that the Comhairle OHT, Calmac Communities Board and the MSP had recently in relation to camper vans on ferries, and there's also a response from Transport Scotland to the issues raised. So that'll probably answer some of the questions in relation to ferry travel particularly, and Councillor MacLeod's reference to how big they can be. They also prevent at times the use of mezzanine decks on ferries, which constrains the number of cars that can travel as well. So I'll speak to Marishina later, and we'll make sure that that gets circulated to all members, Chair.
That's great, Mr. Robertson. Thanks for that update. Now, the recommendations at 3.1 for your agreement. Item 14 is the Town Centre Legacy Fund. The report provides an update on the Legacy Fund and considers a proposal to allocate funds to the Town Centre printing scheme and the Conservation Area Building Grant funding, which would seem an appropriate use of the Town Centre Legacy Fund. And Joe McPhee is here to speak on to this report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Town Centre Legacy Fund has been used to support some activities in and around the town centre, and that's the reason it was set up initially. And there are a number of things in the pipeline, particularly associated with the Stornoway Vision Strategy, which is looking at our town centre and ways in which we can encourage investment over a long-term period to support the town centre through a range of small and medium and long-term projects. What we're proposing here is to allocate 15,000 from the Legacy Fund towards the painting scheme and the conservation grant scheme to continue to support that kind of fairly critical work that goes on, particularly around the visual amenity of the town centre, and to encourage the businesses themselves to take ownership and responsibility and pride in presenting a vibrant and successful town centre. So happy to take any questions, Chair, that members have.
Thank you very much, Mr. McPhee. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. McPhee. Very supportive of this. I've just got one question and one comment, really. What's the total income from the rental for that property? And the second one is, having looked at the scheme of administration, is it not under policy and resources that the administration of income from buildings should be administered? Just going back to the last debate we had about not allowing an amendment to go forward because it wasn't in the budget. I thought this report should be coming to policy and resource rather than sustainable, but maybe someone could clarify that. Thanks.
Mr. McPhee.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I've highlighted in the report the current balance in the scheme, as you can see, is 34,000. Annual income is approximately 17,000 after the payment of the prudential borrowing associated with the development at Cromwell Street. And from 23-24, the full rental will be 32k. So paragraph 5.5 of the report, Chair. On the other matter, perhaps I couldn't give a view on whether this is sustainable development or policy, but the matter in relation to the fund and the activity around the town centre and these particular schemes is most certainly a matter for this committee.
Indeed, and it's part of its budget, and that's why it's relevant to this committee and why it's been discussed here. Councillor Ria Macaulay.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question, please. Thanks for letting me in. Does that fund, well, obviously it does, include the sale of what is now the new dentist? I can't remember. What was this? I thought you said it was is that what the fund is? Or how much was the sale price of that now? We can't remember now. Thanks.
I would have to go back and check too, Chair, on the figures, but that was some years ago. But all the receipts in relation to that town centre fund was to be retained for town centre use and investment. So, but I'll have to go back to Councillor Macaulay with the detail of the figures at the time.
Well, I think at one point, I think at one point we were going to get profit and loss, if you like, of the amount of money that went into it at the beginning and what the money was spent on over the years. It might be quite useful to know what exactly the areas in Stornoway that the funds have been spent on. Because I mean, I haven't a clue how much it was sold for now, but I'm sure it was probably 70, 80,000 or at least at the time. I don't know. But that would be great. Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah, we can circulate that, Chair.
Cheers, thanks.
Thank you. Members agree to recommendation 3.1.
Chair, I didn't get clarification on my scheme of administration. I think it states that rental income is under the administration of policy and resources. Could I get clarification from the clerk or the chief executive on that, please?
Well, I think in terms of you're trying to link this with the previous amendment, the amendment was seeking to identify, restore funding from a budget that is not under this committee. But I'll ask Mr. Anne, are you around to clarify? No?
Just looking for consistency, Chair, that's all.
There is consistency. There is consistency. Norman, are you there? MacDonald?
Yes, I'm here. But I would have agreed with Joe. I would have said that this was part of the Sustainable Development Budget. But I'm not quite sure about the governance arrangements around that.
Yeah. Thank you. Recommendations again at a 3.1. Item 15, the Great Place Project Strategy. This report provides an update on the Great Place project and seeks delegation for further consideration as a final strategy document to the Sustainable Development Strategic Mode in conjunction with the Heritage Forum. And we had a good discussion about this with our colleagues at Museums Galleries Scotland last Friday, as indicated at the start of the meeting. And Joe McPhee will speak to this report.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The development of the strategy is going well. We're not quite there in terms of bringing the draft strategy document to you until it's been fully considered by the steering group. There's another meeting of the steering group tomorrow, and by the Heritage Forum and Heritage groups. It's a critical piece of work in terms of setting a framework strategy for the next 10 years. The action plan has also been developed, and we've got the first draft of that action plan tomorrow for review. What I'd like to do with your approval is to bring the version of that to the MOG and do that in conjunction with the Heritage Forum and invite the Heritage Forum to chair and whoever else wish to come to the forum to the MOG to look at this and to discuss other matters in relation to moving this item forward, and particularly resourcing some of the actions arising from the action plan. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McPhee. Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Joe. You've said a lot of what I was going to say anyway, and you followed the agreement that this would come before the forum at some point. So, and the member officer working group. Just to confirm that there will be a further report coming to the June series, as you say, that's going to happen, yeah.
Yes, for sure, yes, indeed.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. And Mr. McPhee, any further questions? Otherwise, members, their recommendation 3.1 for your agreement. And item 16 said reports outstanding, and that's for noting. And the next scheduled meeting of the committee will be on 16th of June 2021. Just want to thank you, colleagues, officers, for your attendance and contributions to the meeting this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Very much, Chair.